with nematode injury, in many cases, we don't think about them, we're not aware of them, we go misdiagnosed, and the problem is that a lot of those problems look very much like other things that go on. You know, stunting, yellowing, uneven height, a lot of these symptoms, a lot of what we're seeing right now. You know, we've had uneven height, we have what could be waterlogged, nitrogen, potassium deficiencies, all insect injury, disease levels, all of those things could be impacting the crop. One thing I want you to take away is that all those things occur all the time. Add nematodes to your checklist as well. Think about those in there as well. Often when we look at, for example, this one, this needle nematode, we look at roots like this and we see the stunting on those roots. What's the first thing we often think of when we see stunted corn roots? Rootworm. Rootworm is one of the first things we think of. It wasn't the one I was thinking about, but that was getting close. But that was on my list. I'm a pathologist, so besides disease, one of the other things is herbicides too. Herbicides will give us that stubby rootness, insect injury, rootworm injury, diseases that can be pruning. We're getting that discoloration. In many cases, this case, they come in as a secondary pathogen opportunist, herbicide, fertilizer burn, compaction, all of these things that can impact those roots, we often can trigger off pretty easily or rhyme off, but nematodes need to be added to that list as well. In this particular case, when we look at needle nematode, it can be quite significant in terms of the injury, and I'll talk about the significance of knowing the different ones. This root lesion one, in many cases, you get a lot of browning, discoloration of the roots. It also seems to, this one prefers more lighter textured soils. Root lesion nematode can affect multiple crops. So one thing to keep in mind when we're looking at nematode injury in corn is talk to the grower, find out history. If you see consistent problems or chronic problem fields or chronic problem areas, think nematodes, because something like a root lesion nematode can affect corn, can affect soybeans, it can affect wheat, edibles, hort crops. So a lot of the main crops our guys grow can be affected by this. Unlike soybean cyst nematode, where every time I grew soybeans I had a damaged area, but when corn and wheat were there, they weren't quite as affected. But in this case, with root lesion nematode, you may find that problem every year in that spot. And you've tested for fertility, you tested for soil structure, you tested for a lot of the other check marks that we do, but we weren't able to find an answer. I think nematodes may be something to keep in mind on those ones. And when we look at the different nematodes and testing for the different nematodes, we can base them out on risks. So certain ones, such as the root lesion nematode, our most predominant one that we see in the province, we often will see that what I call a moderate risk impact there. But things such as sting and needle nematode are what we would call high risk, high potential for damage, but also we can see things a little differently in where they establish. Root lesion nematode, as I said, rotation doesn't have much of an effect. Soil type has very little effect. The sting and needle nematode, on the other hand, often what we'll see here is that they're on the coarser soil types. They tend to be larger nematodes, so they need the coarser soil types, the pore sizing or openings to allow the nematode to move through. On the tighter soils, finer textured soils, they're not able to move as much around. So there's that thing. So keep those in mind. And when we do a soil test, you often will get the soil test back. You might have things like spiral, stunt, and dagger in there as well. But they're important to know and that they're there. But they're also probably what I consider probably our lower risk nematode species out of the group. And when taking a soil test for nematodes, don't think I told you this one yet, right? Good. Too many talks. But anyway, when we do soil tests and we do our cyst nematode soil test, we'll often take a fertility sample, for instance, cut it in half for fertility, the other half for cyst. When we do the nematode side of things, what we want to do is take, because they're both what we call endoparasites and ectoparasites. So ectoparasites just mean that the nematodes feed on the outside of the root, don't go inside. The endoparasites, such as the root lesion nematode, migrate into the roots themselves, and they'll stay within the roots. So if we just take a soil sample, we won't get a true understanding of what the nematode populations are for those ones. And so what we need to do is send roots as well. So you can take a soil sample, you can also collect root balls and send the roots off, or even better, and that way you only have to take one sample, is instead of probing between the row or near the row, you go across the root zone, and what you're doing as you're probing, you're collecting a lot of roots in that core, right? And you take your cores through that, send it into the soil lab, ask for a nematode analysis, a full nematode analysis, and what they'll do is they pull off the fine roots, they'll sieve them out, and then they'll check both the soil for nematode counts as well as what you have in terms of the roots.